So there is a YouTuber called Gothix, and she was, I think she was like a previous SJW or whatever, who then turned left, did the whole left the left thing, and became like a right wing online commentator because she realizes there's more of a kind of audience and more of a kind of funding level for that. I can't confirm nor quash that assertion, but it's just what it looks like to me. It feels like grift, but she knows that everyone thinks that she's a grifter, or maybe she's double, like it's like a double cross where she is a grifter, but she's called her program the grift because she realizes how obvious it is that she's grifting, or that how obvious it could look that she's grifting. So by calling herself a grifter, she's kind of nullifying any of those criticisms, but it's all fucking up in the air at this point. Anyway, she's a deeply stupid person. I've covered her content on here before. She debated Hunter Avallone and literally is just like incapable of making any kind of substantive point or rebutting at points that other people make. She also doesn't understand how data works, or how structures work, or how systems work, or how society works. She doesn't understand anything. She's just a very, very dumb person. But she's contentious, and she's an I left the left person, and she looks like an SJW, but isn't an SJW. So she kind of courts a specific audience. Like she's got a USP as a right wing commentator in that regard. And she has like panels with like Buck Angel and Blair White and a bunch of trans people who hate the transis shit. And she put out a video called "Trans Women Are Men," which is funny to me. She's not even got the problematic grifter in her title, like it's so obvious to me. Right, so previously the video title was just called "Trans Women Are Still Men," right? And I was literally just looking at this like, I know that's what you believe, Gothix. That's what's half the conservative online propaganda machine is there to do, is just tell people that trans women are men, right? Like, what fucking brave take. Oh, well done, 10 out of 10. I even responded to the tweet with, hard-hitting, never before heard takes from any conservative media out there. I even quote tweeted it with a funny thing, which is probably similar to the probably will be similar to the actual um thumbnail that I give this segment. Like, look at me, I'm just gonna put a video out which has mainstream right wing takes, and I'm just gonna be able to, get some views off of that. Like, yeah, sure, well done. That's like a leftist putting out a video just called "Capitalism is Bad." I'm like, oh, what? Wow, I didn't realize leftists thought capitalism was bad. Wow, how fucking well done. You've really clearly found something incredibly interesting and new here. Um, but whatever. Apparently, she's updated it to call it "Gender Identity Leads to Child Abuse." I think she actually means gender ideology rather than gender identity, because everyone has a gender identity. That's how gender works. But gender ideology, this idea of, whether or not people can be, whether people are the gender that they say they are, or whether there's this difference in gender and sex, whether they're fundamentally linked or whatever, and the way in which you kind of work your way around this, that's kind of gender ideology. I think that's what she means by this title, but then again, she doesn't understand how words work, she doesn't understand what any of these things mean, she's very stupid. I'm going to obviously poison the well as much as I like here, because whatever, I don't think any rightoids are going to watch my channel anyway. But yeah, we will watch her video. Tell the truth. Trans women are men! Exclamation mark. And again, brilliant. You've clearly understood how to be able to get views on this platform by just being contentious. But whatever, we're going to watch the video, we're going to respond to it. Apparently Xanderhall responds to it, apparently it's very stupid, I'm not surprised. But let me just watch this, and then it'll probably even be difficult to respond to. It's not going to actually contain any proper scientific information or anything like that. It's just going to be her going, well, if trans women aren't men, then why do they have XY chromosomes? And I'm gonna have to roll my eyes a lot, but we'll see. We'll see. Let us put this into 1.25 times speed. Let's put this into. It's in 720p. Fucking hell! Why would you have this elaborate setup and then upload your videos in 720p? Whatever. Let's just fucking go.
Gothix, and for today's video, I wanted to talk about telling the truth and why we should always strive to tell the truth and not lie. Obviously, there's going to be some circumstances where you
I feel sorry for trans people, but I just can't lie about what they are. My heart bleeds.
might have to lie. Like, for example, if someone broke into your house and they were looking for your kids, you're going to lie and say they're not there. But in a lot of circumstances that I'm seeing today, there's too much lying going on. And lying is a necessary component to creating a totalitarian society. In order for
Okay, what the fuck are we going on now? Literally, just like, if you say trans women are women, this is totalitarianism. I bet she's gonna try and make some kind of link towards, like, gender ideology bringing communism or something like that, but whatever. This is already pretty fucking wild. But, just people lie all the time, like, for all sorts of reasons. Not that, saying trans women are women is a lie. But, lying isn't. Like, you can have a totalitarian state based off entirely truthful things that you then frame incorrectly. And that's the thing, is that a lot of conservative propaganda is taking statistics that are in abstract true, but then misappropriating what the statistics mean to be able to purport a false narrative, right? Which isn't technically lying. So, it's decide again. She's just trying to. This kind of conservative line, this kind of consuming their whole media apparatus at this point, that the liberals are coming to take your children away, basically. That liberals are communists. They're trying to build communism, and that's why BLM are Marxists, and it's postmodernists trying to trans your kids or whatever. To try and completely extrapolate way further than what's actually happening to try and scare people against the ideologies of the people they disagree with, rather than just taking things at face value. It can't be taken in abstract. It has to be part of this whole editorial line about the collapse of society or whatever. So that's the kind of angle I'm assuming she's going with here.
For totalitarianism to exist, you have to convince the population to lie. Because if you can get them to do that, it creates a rippling effect, because now you have to add another lie on top of that lie, on top of that lie, on top of that lie. And that is where we're headed right now. So I wanted to make this video.
I mean, that's not necessarily untrue. I think she's correct in asserting that if you take base principles and you make them, and you spread at least false information about those base principles, you allow more disinformation to be able to breed from that. I don't think that's necessarily untrue.
To plea, pretty please, that you guys don't lie. So for this video, I want to talk about one type of lie in particular that I believe is causing a lot of harm in society, actual rippling effects in society. Before I
The problem is that she's gonna have to actually try and prove that the thing is, she's loading it already by saying trans women are women is a lie, when this it's at very least incredibly, like, a contentious issue in which people will disagree on what the definitions of these things are. The issue is that when you're just talking about language and vernacular and the way in which society calls different things now, and naming conventions and all these kind of typologies or whatever, you have to, at least from a descriptivist perspective, which is what I would come out from, which is, I guess, reasonably postmodern, but whatever, is to understand that, well, the way in which we name things is entirely socially constructed, right? What a woman is going to mean different things based on how it's constructed. And if you come from, I guess, from Gothix's viewpoint, in which gender and sex are immutable things that are born out of the same kind of fabric or whatever, that they are essentially the same thing. And so trans women may look and act, or may conform to ideas of what the feminine gender role might be, but since gender and sex are the same thing and they have XY chromosomes, you can't extricate that. So that's, in her mind, that's what a woman is, right? That's what constitutes what being a woman is. But that's just where she's come from, her prescriptivist understanding of language. Whereas I would say understand that the vast majority of people, if you take away anything that I actually believe about how gender identity works or what gender is or whatever, there are plenty. If Blair White was to go out in the street, right? If Blair White was walking down the street and someone was pointing out who Blair White was, or like trying to comment on a piece of her appearance, like, so that comment that Blair White's jacket was nice or whatever, and they were talking to the person that they were with, they would say that woman's jacket is nice. They wouldn't say that person over there who actually is a man but looks like a woman, but they have XY chromosomes, his jacket is nice or whatever. That's not how anyone actually uses language in the real world. The ContraPoints video about pronouns is really good with regards to this. But again, if you don't know who Blair White was, and you didn't know that she was, and you didn't understand where she was from a kind of popular perspective, there's no one fucking anywhere would look at her and tell that she was a man from, would look at her from first principles and say that is a man, because that's just not how any of these things work, how the utility of any of these words work in practice. Because, we have our own understandings from a cultural level of what women are you tend to look like, and then we map our own prescriptions of that, our own perspectives on that from what we actually engage with, right? We would look at her and go, "That's a woman." We all make snap decisions there and then. There are probably plenty of people watching the stream making a snap decision that I'm a man, right? Based on how I talk, based on how I look. Even though obviously I'm outwardly, purporting femininity, and internally I would call myself trans woman, there are plenty of people who would look at me and go, "That's a man," or whatever, and I don't give a shit, right? I get called plenty of worse things on the internet that I don't really care at this point. I have a pretty thick skin, but and again, for me, the concept's incredibly murky, so much that I don't care. But there are plenty of people who do care, and internally, it's incredibly upsetting when that happens. Which is why they will get things like feminization surgery or masculinization surgery for trans men or whatever. And while life is generally easier for trans men, because once you take testosterone and you grow a beard, it's very difficult for anybody to look at you and understand that you're and understand what your kind of biological sex is, right? I tend to kind of go with a kind of more Butlerian view of gender performativity, and things being inferred through societal and cultural norms rather than something being like an innate understanding of what gender is, right? But then again, I think that because the concept is so murky, the lens with which to view it from an understanding of the internal identification is probably just the easiest way of doing it, considering how difficult these concepts are to on a um how difficult these concepts are to marry together, right?
I get into it, I just want to say that the people who I'm describing, what I'm saying,
I appreciate that, Amity Island. I mean, I'm obviously when my voice is reverberating in my own head, I guess it probably sounds more masculine than on the recordings, because any kind of baritone um vibrations from my voice that are carrying through the rest of my head get amplified by the fact that I'm hearing the voice inside my own head, whereas what gets outwardly expressed isn't being carried through my own um uh skull, essentially, which is why it probably sounds more baritone to me than it actually is.
does not mean that I don't think you're a human being. It doesn't mean that I hate you. It doesn't mean that I don't believe you should be allowed to be in society. It doesn't mean that I want you to die. It doesn't mean that I want you to get
But whether or not you want us to die, or whether you want us to be in society, doesn't actually matter, based upon the actual material consequences of the adoption of the things that you're trying to express here, and the societal, laws and things that get passed based upon the things and the prescriptions that you're making in this video, Gothix. So, if you say, for example, say that trans women are men and therefore they have to use men's toilets or whatever, that's going to lead to load of us being beaten up, right? That's just going to happen a lot of the time, or sexually assaulted. That's just the case of the things that you're trying to expand here.
treated poorly. But what it does mean is that I believe.
Then again, most conservatives are all deontologists, and so they believe advocating for what they believe is right based upon some kind of moral code and the understanding of the morality of where the actions come from rather than the material consequences of such.
And repeating the truth and only the truth. So let's talk about it. Gender identity. It is a lie. And I don't know why you're going to start screaming at your
I'm just gonna scream at you. I'm just gonna you're just wrong. There's plenty of scientific papers understanding what gender identity is.
keyboard. I'm glad I opened up the video with what I just said, because I can assume that lots of people are going to start screaming at me through their computer screen. But it is a lie. And no amount of gender studies, gender identity theory, political activism, trans activism, none of this is going to remove the reality that you, at the end of the day, are still lying. Whenever I'm talking about this,
The problem is, again, you've not explained this other than just saying that I'm correct because I say that I'm correct, right? That's not you, unless you're going to actually expand upon the point that you make. Let me just ban these bots 1 sec. You can't just say it's a lie without providing the justification for that, right? Self-important, disingenuous bullshit. True, metaphysical, but yeah, exactly. Like she's not. I mean, I guess maybe she'll quantify it later. Only 2 minutes into a 15-minute video, but essentially, what she understands is that her viewership already believe what she's saying. She doesn't need to expand on it because it's not about trying to convince people on my side. It's trying to affirm the viewpoints of the people who are already watching, which I guess I kind of am doing as well, but at least I admit it, where she's trying to is trying to look outwardly to her existing viewer base that what she's saying is to try and change the minds of people on my side of this discussion. But that's not what's actually happening with the content that's being made here. I mean, there's a reason why the WHO and the American Psychological Association and all these and the NHS and all of these different incredibly reputable science and fact-driven bodies all recognise the understanding of gender identity and the existence of trans people and the affirmation and the kind of therapies and transition therapies that are prescribed by these organisations all fall down on our side of this argument, right? There's a reason why then. That's because ours is scientifically rooted, whereas yours is ideologically driven.
I'll usually get the response, why do you care what people identify as? And I don't. I have to make that explicitly clear. I don't care what someone identifies as. What I do care about is when they take their lie and try to package it as truth to the rest of the world. So when you start demanding someone refer to you by certain pronouns, you're saying, I want you to lie with me.
But again, you've not accurately provided any justification as to why it's a lie, because it's obviously not, because all the science says that it's not a lie. But again, that's not what the point of this video is, because she's not trying to convert anybody on my side. She's only speaking to the people who already agree with her by not quantifying the original axiom of this point that she's making.
And you start putting this in academia and having things like gender study courses. And then you start having assignments for students to identify and select their identity and what pronouns they want to use. That is, again,
conservative YouTuber definitely knows more than the vast majority of the scientific and medical communities.
Conditioning people to lie with you. And this is a very dangerous, slippery slope that we're on right now, and we need to derail it. And the way that we can do that is by refusing to lie. And let me just make this extremely clear. If you're someone that identifies as a cactus, go ahead, boo-boo, identify as a cactus. But your identity should not be in textbooks. It shouldn't be anywhere except between you and your therapist. So let's actually consider the consequences of feeding into the gender identity lie. And all that I'm talking about right now is currently happening. So let's consider
You're absolutely right. And at the end of the day, it's not trans people who are pushing this, for example. It is the scientific and medical communities who are pushing this, because that's where these textbooks come from. That's where the points of view in these textbooks are taken from. They're taken from the overwhelming scientific consensus on these issues, rather than some kind of pressure group or whatever. And I mean, at least not in science textbooks, regardless. I mean, a lot of history textbooks are written with a specific viewpoint in mind. But then again, that's getting into a whole different conversation about historiography and the way in which we choose on what to report on. But I digress.
Guy that believes he's a woman. Now, if the rest of society starts repeating that lie, it then gives this guy permission to then say, I don't feel understood, accepted, or safe going into the men's bathroom. So I want to use the women's bathroom because you guys all said I'm a woman, so I'm going to go use that bathroom. And this, my friends, has been leading to lots of sexual assault cases in spas.
I get to do it. Citation needed! I got to say citation needed very loud. But yeah, there's no truth to this at all. So, for example, you look at, say, for example, countries in which they have self-ID, places like Ireland, etc. This is not the case. The fact there's not been any kind of increase. There's no study showing there to be an increase in sexual assaults in these areas due to the affirmation of trans women as women, especially considering that trans women have been using women's facilities and women's toilets literally forever. They've always been using them. There's never been a time when we've just not used them. The only time that people take umbrage about when we use them is when we don't pass. That's the issue, right? The issue is that more people are. It's now a hot button topic for the conservative media and for a large part of the liberal media as well. But now there's focus on it, people are now scrutinizing it. When if there's always trans people have always used the facilities of the gender that they are that they identify with, rather than that they were assigned at birth. That's literally always been the case.
In bathrooms, in prisons.
And again, this is again, this is not appealing to people upon the other side of the argument. This is affirming the points of view of the people who already hold this specific opinion, because that's why she's been talking about the fact that it's a lie, not arguing why it should be a lie, right? She's not trying to tell us that trans women are men and people are lying about them being women, and this is why. She's saying this is a lie. We all agree on this because you're my existing viewer base. This is why this lie that I'm assuming is bad for society in general because of all of these additional externalities, which probably the most of them won't even be true, right? Exactly, like the magic sign on the bathroom door doesn't stop people from going into wanting to do a sex attack, right? If a man is, or a woman, to be fair, because both both and all genders can engage in sexual violence and can be the perpetrators of sexual violence, but obviously it is mostly men who engage in sexual violence, so we'll just assume that it's a man for this, for the purpose of what we're doing here. If they want to go into a women's bathroom to do that, they'll just fucking do it. There's not like a chromosome force field that stops them from being able to enter. It's like, well, I was going to go and commit a heinous act of sexual violence against somebody, but now there's a sign on the door. I'm not going to be able to do it. And why would anyone go through the the rigmarole of entirely going through the whole level of gender reassignment to be able to get access to something like a women's prison? Where, for example, the vast majority of people who are get put into women's prisons who are trans women are people who've gone in, you've had gender reassignment surgery, and who have a gender recognition certificates in the UK at the very least. Like, if you don't have a GRC, you probably aren't going to get into a women's prison. And if you are somebody, especially if you're someone who has a GRC and you are someone who is in prison because of sexual violence, then if the prison aren't putting you into a place in which they can control the level to which that you could be a harm to other prisoners. That's a fault of the prison. That's not a fault of the idea that we put trans women in women's prisons, right? There are already, you know, there are already procedures in place to protect people in women's prisons from sexual assault, no matter whether the perpetrator, no matter whether people going into those prisons are cis women or trans women, right? Because a woman who has a history of sexual assaults against other women is also going to be a danger in these prisons. And there's already procedures in place to separate these out from Gen Pop to be able to keep people who are in these prisons safe. And the same would go for trans women. The issue is that when trans women, when was it Karen White did commit sexual assault in prisons, that's the one case that I know of. This was because these procedures weren't followed properly, and that's the fault of those procedures not being followed properly, not the fault of putting trans women in women's prisons. Although it is interesting from all these people, again, obviously she's a conservative, so I'm not going to expect anything from her. But it's amusing from all the kind of left-leaning side of this particular discussion. The the line has been keep prisons single sex and not abolish prisons.
In schools, it's happening.
In California, biological male criminals are allowed to be housed in female prisons if they identify as women.
Actually, I have seen data that does show that the bathrooms which are non-sex segregated, so all gender bathrooms, have seen an increase in sexual assaults. That's what I have seen. In that, just natural spaces in which women and men intermingle, regardless, does increase the likelihood of sexual assault. So I think what you actually need is just an all gender bathroom, and then then a men's room and a women's room, right? And then women who don't feel comfortable in the unisex bathroom can then use a sex segregated space, right, or gender segregated space, whatever. I think that's a more easy way of doing things, and then everybody has all of their needs sorted. It's difficult to then put a third bathroom in every single public space. Although I do miss being at university, where it was all cubicles. Made everything so much easier. There was no gendered toilets. There was just toilets which had full doors, which didn't have any kind of holes at the bottom and the top. Which, why the fuck do cubicles do that? I fucking hate that shit. Why cubicles have gaps at the top and the bottom is nightmarish to me. They had individual cubicles with actual stone walls, or like which had actual walls all the whole way around and doors that close properly shut, right? Which were unisex. That's just continue doing that. Have separate urinals, but just have individual cubicles, and it just makes life so much better because it means that you don't have to worry about any of this.
Women's Liberation Front, or WOLF, a feminist organization which is in direct contact with inmates and staff, tells NTD that at least one woman in Central California women's facility is pregnant as a result of the male inmates.
Janaya Monroe, a transgender woman in Illinois, who was transferred from a men's prison to a women's facility. That was after she alleged male inmates had sexually harassed her. But in her new prison, Monroe herself was accused of raping a female inmate.
The attack took place in a girls' restroom. The alleged attacker allowed access by the school's transgender policy.
Again, this isn't statistics. This isn't a data-driven study. This isn't an understanding of the threat these people possess. All this is an anecdote. This is one person who hasn't been, where the procedures haven't been followed to the letter, right? Clearly this person was a danger. And if they're getting somebody pregnant, they're not even on some kind of hormone regimen. Otherwise they would be otherwise they wouldn't even be, fertile with which to impregnate somebody. And obviously, yeah, RT not exactly the most reliable news source. Let's see if there's a source for this particular. Oh, this is CBN News as well. Let's see if there's a source for this in the description. Nope. No sources provided whatsoever. Of course there's no sources. What was this? Let me have a look at the article. Do you have the name?
Pregnant as a result of the male inmates.
Janaya Monroe, a transgender...
Janaya Monroe, let me... It's true, you only need one story and then you ride the outrage rather than actually looking at the studies. Because again, these people are allergic to data. These people are allergic to actually quantifying their things with some kind of study to back it up. Jeez, this person was in prison for murder as well. It's Illinois Times. Let's have a look at... This seems like usually the local newspapers are reasonably non-partisan. Jesus Christ, what the fuck are these... But again, prisons don't care about their inmates is the issue. Why a lot of these procedures don't get followed properly. The issue is with prisons, obviously because prisons are bad, and we should abolish them. Harassing staff of their inmates. She wasn't even taking fucking hormones. Fucking hell. Why are you putting someone who's in prison for murder into fucking Gen Pop? Fucking hell. The prison system's absolute garbage. But the problem is the issue is that you need to have these systems in place to protect women from, danger from, inmates who have been convicted of these kind of things. But they don't care about these procedures because they don't care about any of the inmates because it's fucking prison, right?
Janaya Monroe, a transgender woman in Illinois.
Exactly, that's true, Amity Island. People will misattribute statistics about this and say that trans people are involved in the majority of prison sexual violence. The issue is that the trans people are the most likely to be the victim in most of these instances, right? That's what the data shows us. But obviously you can find a singular case in which someone's not been treated correctly by the prison system, and this has led to harm being done, right? You can take the singular story and then blow this up as to be able to create a narrative rather than actually looking at any data, which I'm sure that she will not provide anywhere in this particular
Who was transferred from a men's prison to a women's facility. That was after she alleged male inmates had sexually harassed her. But in her new prison, Monroe herself was accused of raping a female inmate.
The attack took place in a girls' restroom. The alleged attacker allowed access by the school's transgender policy. Scott Smith, father of that victim, is suing the school system after being arrested while trying to confront the board at a recent meeting.
It was a sexual assault of a 10-year-old girl inside a Denny's bathroom that years later resulted in a cold case DNA hit and an arrest of this suspect, then ID'd as James Tubbs. Now, a 26-year-old transgender woman.
An investigation now underway after a
He wasn't even identifying as transgender at the time the assault took place. So the sign on the door would have done nothing.
Gender student was accused of sexual assault at an elementary school.
Police identified the person involved as 52-year-old Darren Morager of Riverside County. Morager, who has been a registered sex offender since 2006, now faces 5 felony counts of indecent exposure.
This is the opposite of human rights because you are ignoring the cries of innocent people to further your own agenda. That's not human
I'll just speed this up because I've got a panel in a sec.
rights. That is something else. I don't know what that is. So let's consider the other aspects of this slippery slope. Hate speech. Telling the truth has now been labeled as
again, no data.
hate speech. So if I say that man is still a man, that woman is still a woman, you're either a male or a female, you can't be either or both. If I say those things,
You can, not be male or female, you can be intersex. Like, that's literally just a fact. That's an absolute fact that exists, right? Scientifically proven. There are plenty of, chromosomal configurations other than X, Y, and XX. Like, that's just wrong. That's just factually incorrect.
in the eyes of many, that's considered hate speech, right? And the reason
You're in America. You've got a fucking First Amendment.
that they'll pound this idea of hate speech into your head is because they'll say this will lead to violence against non-binary and trans people. That's what
And how many stories about trans people being assaulted in prisons do you ever hear on these networks like Fox News and Russia Today, right? Why would they ever report on it? Because it doesn't fit in with their editorial
it
line.
will lead to violence. Me telling the truth will lead to the violence of these individuals. So because of that, because society has been fed that lie, it is now opening up an opportunity to educate society on what gender identity is. And here goes the
Always manufacturing consent in it.
slippery slope again. So now you have kids coming home telling their parents that they feel like they're the opposite sex or they feel like they're trans when kids should be learning about math, science, history, the basics in life to actually prepare.
There is no proof of the societal contagion theory at all. Lisa Littman's study has been already being debunked plenty of times. There's a really great Jangle Science Slide video on it. The social contagion theory about it just doesn't exist. It's just not true. Again, there's no did you not quantify this? I've checked the video description. There's no sources. You're not providing any sources in the video so far.
Prepare you for the real world. They're instead learning about what they identify as.
The parents of a Clay County elementary student say they're suing the district. They say a school counselor violated their parental rights by meeting with the child to discuss gender identity. The lawsuit says the parents were only made aware of the counseling meetings after the student made 2 suicide attempts.
Parents are not happy with the Rockland Charter School Academy for having transgender discussions in a kindergarten.
Again, this is not about the fact of the matter or what a lie is or whether trans people are the gender they say they are. This is just about a conservative moral panic about, teachers teaching science, essentially.
Kindergarten class.
The kindergartners came home very confused about whether or not you can pick your gender, whether or not they really were a boy or a girl.
Their daughter claims she has experienced gender confusion, which according to her parents...
Oh, yes, of course. Incredibly rigorous Vox Pop interviews. That's the same as data, isn't it?
...was mostly due to peer pressure. School executives then met with the young girl and allegedly encouraged her to explore her feelings of gender fluidity without the parents' consent.
You can't smoke, you can't drink, you're technically not allowed to see a rated R movie, but here we are.
Exploring their gender fluidity, that's just going to be an internal process, right? The parents, can force the child to wear certain clothes or act in a certain way or be perceived in a certain way and call them certain things, right? That's not going to stop this person from having some kind of internal level of gender identity because, again, that's also a scientific fact. And children's gender identities are something that they experience from age 3 and up, right? There's been understanding of internal gender identity from incredibly young ages, and there's scientific data to back it up.
Are with young kids thinking that they are the opposite sex. So from there, this is causing agitation between the school board and the parents. So now the parents want to know, why are you teaching our kid about different pronouns and identifying as the opposite sex when they know damn well what they were born as?
Because that's in the same way that they would teach them about plenty of other things, if, for example, you are an atheist and there are religious studies people teaching children about the fact that a religion exists, that's not indoctrination, right? They might come out of that saying, well, I don't know, is there a God, isn't there a God? Well, yeah, they're bound to have some kind of level of, there's bound to be some kind of indefinite response to this on the part of the kids being taught about this stuff. Just because a kid is being taught about being transgender isn't going to make them transgender.
In some states, if a child goes to their parent and says, "Mommy, Daddy, I feel like I'm the opposite sex," and that parent doesn't start addressing that in terms of getting them on hormones or trying to
No child, right, okay, no child is being put on hormones. Under the age of 16 and above the age of 10 or something, you'll get put on blockers. No children under the age of 16 at all are getting any hormones whatsoever. That is not a thing that's happening.
adapt them to
And also,
their
what they're saying is like, oh, I may not be a boy or I may be a girl. That's not what's happening either. They go to a psychologist, they go to a doctor, they get, medical practitioners, then advising them on the steps to take moving forward, right? At no point is the law saying, as soon as someone says that I identify a certain way, they need to be affirmed or you're breaking the law. That's just not true. It's just another moral panic. That's just not true in any sense of the
new
word.
identity, they can actually get in trouble with the state. Did you know that? So now what is happening is the state is claiming that they have authority over how you raise your child. And by the way, while this is all happening, the gender identity ideology is leading to a billion-dollar industry for gender reassignment surgery and the pharmaceutical field.
How about you have universal healthcare? Not that the NHS is doing very well for trans people at all at the moment, right? But that's an issue with the with the marketized, medical system that you have in the United States, right? But this is incredibly fucking disingenuous. The idea that big pharma are in collusion with the teaching apparatus in schools to sell children into the trans ideology so that they can sell them trans drugs. This is just fucking conspiracy theory at this point. Again, with no evidence.
It is making so much money, and it really bothers me because the people that are buying into this idea, the people that say, I don't think I'm a girl and therefore I think I'm a guy or I'm non-binary or I'm both or I'm neither, you guys are being used. And I don't know if you realize that. Hopefully at the end of this video you'll realize it, but you guys—
No, because it's not true. You've provided no evidence for this claim. You just go, well, they have to buy drugs and big pharma profits, so big pharma must be controlling the strings somewhere. Something Rothschild Soros.
They're being used, and you're lining the pockets of people that in reality don't actually care about you. They want to play on your mental wellness or illness. We'll get to this in a second. And they want to play on this so they can line their pockets. If they actually cared about you, they wouldn't be telling you to lie. In the eyes of gender identity, telling the truth is considered hate speech. And because of that, it's led to legislation.
Again, you've not demonstrated why it's the truth.
That is now requiring psychologists to lie instead of push back on their clients or tell the truth. So this is—
It's almost like the APA knows more than you do, Gothix.
And what you call gender-affirming doctors. And that's not a thing, by the way. But let me explain what it is if I think I'm a guy and I go to one of these doctors and I tell them I feel like I'm a guy, they'll go, okay, here's your stamp of approval. Go get your hormones. Go have—
No, that's not what happens. You have whole psychological evaluations. You see multiple different medical professionals before they even give you any hormones at all. That's just not what happens. You just haven't got a fucking idea what the fuck you're talking about, Gothix. Again, this is just scare propaganda for her audience.
Your surgery, have fun. That's not therapy. That's someone agreeing with me. That's someone lying. And again, here we go, funneling more money back into the pharmaceutical field, back into the gender reassignment field. It's just creating this massive billion-dollar industry. And now we have the issue of misdiagnosing people. So because there is no pushback at these psychologists, they're not properly diagnosing what is exactly wrong with the person up here. Now, interestingly enough, I had a roundtable conversation on my channel with a bunch of transsexuals. And if you don't know what transsexualism is, it's basically—
Spoiler alert. It's bad. Goddammit, Malcolm covered that panel. He did an excellent job of breaking down why the panel was stupid. I will leave the link to his channel in the description as well.
Someone that believes they are in the wrong body. If a male thinks that he's a woman and a woman thinks that he's a male, and all of these individuals undergo some type of surgery or hormones to emulate the opposite sex. Now, whether or not I agree with it, that's besides the point, but what is very important in that conversation, and I recommend you check it out if you so happen to be someone that's trying to hammer this gender identity lie into society, it's that all of the people I spoke to, all of my guests, they all acknowledge that they are still what they were biologically born as, no matter the amount of hormones.
Yes, all trans people, the vast majority of trans people understand the difference between sex and gender. We understand the circumstance of our birth. We are far, far, far more aware of the circumstance of our birth than you fucking are, because that's a source of some people's physical dysphoria, if they have physical dysphoria. We know what genitalia we have. We know what chromosomes we have. Or we can at least infer what chromosomes we have. We understand that. That's not the point.
Hormones they take, doesn't matter how many surgeries they have, they're still exactly how they were born. They also acknowledge that they suffer
and we're
from—
not exactly how we were born, because we're, people get surgery, people take hormones, people change their primary and secondary physical sex characteristics.
something called gender dysphoria, which is a mental disorder. So that
Not
means
a mental disorder. The DSM-5 says that it's not a mental disorder anymore.
let's think about this for a second. If transsexuals, people that actually undergo the full surgery to emulate the opposite sex, if they're acknowledging that they have a mental disorder, why is it so easy for you to go to a gender-affirming doctor after one session and get a stamp of approval to start
It's not, because that doesn't happen.
injecting your body with hormones? If gender dysphoria is a mental disorder, why are kids learning about their identity and their pronouns and identifying as the
It's
opposite
not a mental disorder. DSM-5 said that it says that it's not a mental disorder. This was updated years ago.
sex? That is child abuse. That is encouraging a child to believe they have a mental disorder or exploiting their mental disorders. And not just for kids.
I mean, even if it was a mental disorder, there are plenty of children that have mental disorders. They will have ADHD. They will have autism. They'll have Asperger's. They'll have a bunch of different mental. Children can have mental illnesses. Gender dysphoria isn't a mental disorder, at least not by the DSM-5 and what the WHO says, right? That's not the case with regards to gender dysphoria. But even if they did have a mental illness, you know what we do for people who have mental illnesses, even children, we give them treatment. You know what the recommended treatment is for gender dysphoria? Transitioning.
Either for anyone that can walk into a doctor after one session and be told, yeah, you actually are the opposite sex, that is not therapy. And because these people who walk into these clinics aren't being properly diagnosed, it's going to lead to more problems down the line.
Now, there are people who do not get properly diagnosed. This is true, but this is not an issue with gender ideology or the idea of what gender identity is, or the idea of affirming trans people. This is just an issue with the system. Now, I will agree with some part of what she's saying here, and that the desire for the health system to profit means that they are more likely in the United States to give out hormones more quickly than they should do. That's not the case in the vast majority of cases, right? And if you look at somewhere like the UK, where we have universal healthcare, the waiting list can sometimes be years long to even get a first appointment, let alone to be put on hormones.
Fine. What happens after they get their boob implants and they get their hormones? What happens months after the fact when they realize I've made a...
I don't think she understands what hormones do. Like, these tits are fucking 100% real, right? They have not had implants. This is I'm serving up real tit here.
mistake. Oh, you don't have to guess, because again, that's already happening. I actually had a conversation with a detransitioner who said it was so easy to get the stamp of approval for them to transition into the opposite sex, but it was extremely difficult to reverse it. So that is what it's going to lead to. It's going to lead to people getting misdiagnosed because it's not actually pinpointing what's going on up here, and we're just validating.
Again, I'd love to see you provide any proper actual studies backing up any of these claims, but of course you're not, because it's just propaganda.
AKA lying on behalf of that person's feelings to then lead them into a hospital room to get all these surgeries, and then when they do all these modifications to their body, they're wondering, why do I still feel the same way about myself? I thought I would feel different. That is so abusive and evil to me. I think the healthier approach should be encouraging people to be comfortable in their own skin, because not everyone has the luxury to undergo surgery.
That's not what works. That's what leads trans people to kill themselves. That's what the data says. Affirming trans people lowers the suicide rate. All the data says so.
And take hormones anyway. Some people are born with literal disfigurements and have to live that way the rest of their life, but they learn to love.
No, have you not seen, cleft lip surgery? Like, people have these disfigurements or whatever. They have these medically altered, and it leads to far greater levels of happiness overall. That's just
themselves.
What?
And I think that's what we should be doing, is encouraging more love. And love does not
the level of detransition is super fucking low.
mean lying. If you love someone, you'll tell the truth. And I think we should start there. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Remember,
Right, I'm not gonna fucking watch any more of that shit, because I've got a fucking panel to do. But either way, again, I would like to reiterate that this is not an attempt to change anybody's mind. This is a moral panic propaganda piece for her existing audience to move them to a point of radicalization against trans people. She is using this to generate continual viewers who are already scared about the potential of the transgenders, presenting misattributed anecdotes without any data backing them up, to be able to engender the state of panic, for them to become more politically engaged and to engage with more content and to fall further down their anti-trans rabbit hole. That's what this piece is. It's not trying to actually speak to anybody on this side of the on this side of the aisle on this issue. All she is trying to do is scare people with, again, not anything quantifiable. Nothing is backed up with any actual studies or any kind of actual data. All it is just platitudes to speak to her existing audience, because they're hungry for anti-trans content, and that's what she's giving them. Hence why the whole mainstream right-wing opinion mockery I did at the start is exactly what it is, because it's not. That's all it is. It's conservative junk food content at this point. Again, it's literally like if I put up a video saying capitalism is bad, because no one would watch it, because yeah, everyone agrees capitalism is bad on the left. Why would would I be doing? Why would I put a video out that says that? So it's lazy content, it's bad content, it's wrong content, and she's a fucking idiot, as we have seen there. So yeah, like, comment, and subscribe, please, and click the bell, future YouTube viewers, and hopefully she'll debate me on this incredibly stupid video that she put out. Watching this, Gothix, fucking don't be a beta male, debate me.